Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our episode 6 of our 1881 series, What's on Tap? My name is Josh Brew, and I'm the Director of Alumni Engagement here at the UConn Foundation. I'm thrilled to be coming to you this evening to feature a successful alumna down in the Houston, Texas area who started her own brewery. Tonight, we find ourselves entering deep into the heart of Texas to find out what she's been able to do and pay a visit to Southern Yankee Beer Company, featuring alum and fellow Husky, Sydney Porter. Tonight's session, we're going to focus on how Sydney got started, UConn's impact on her career, the move to Houston from Connecticut for Sydney and her family, among other things like her passion for beer, her favorite brewing styles. We're going to cover it all, so just buckle up. We'll get started in just a minute. That being said, now for those of you that were lucky enough to be living in the Houston area and you've been able to pick up the 4-pack that she set aside for everybody, kudos to you. We are thrilled that you're going to be able to taste a flight of her beer tonight. But for those of you that weren't as lucky to live in that area, we apologize in advance. Different liquor laws in every single state have basically made it challenging, to say the least, to get beer out to various cities and states throughout the country. So we do apologize there. However, as Sydney goes through the tasting tonight of those 4 beers, she will be kind of alluding to different styles and flavor profiles throughout the night during those tasting portions that you can kind of take note of and hopefully find some different recommendations that she might be able to throw out to you. You can find in your local liquor store. So make sure you do that. And for those of you in Nebraska to LA, we are thrilled that you can join us tonight. We're thrilled to see all the names popping up tonight so far in the participant list. So we'll get started in just a minute. But before we do that, a couple of housekeeping items like we usually do with these events. First, the chat is open. And as we've learned from beer discussions in the past, this is the best place that you can connect with your fellow Huskies. So make sure that you are jumping in there, letting us know where you're logging in from, what you're drinking tonight, what your favorite beer is, perhaps, or if you want to make some friends on Untapped, on the social platform sharing that talks about beer all the time, feel free to drop that in there. I know that some Huskies made some friends over the last few of these that way. So go ahead and do that. So if you have a chance, jump in the chat, let us know where you're logging in from. We always love to know kind of where Huskies are coming in from. Next, we are going to be having a Q&A section throughout this tonight. So there is a toolbar on your toolbar, I should say, the Q&A section that is there. If you click that, you can go ahead and you can keep your questions flowing through that. I'll be monitoring that as we go forward so that we can ask questions of our panelists tonight. And if you can do it specifically in that space, not the chat, so we can keep everything kind of in line and we don't lose anything throughout the chat as well, that'd be appreciated. Let's see. Next, I want to give a huge shout out to my colleague who's joining me tonight, helping out on the back end, Miranda Reynolds, our AVP for Alumni Relations. She's joining us. So if there's anything tech support related, Miranda and I will be here to kind of help out if you need anything tonight. So just let us know along the way. And lastly, tonight's event has 2 parts. You may have seen that in your confirmation emails or when you signed up. The first is going to be via this webinar platform that you're all participating in right now. This portion of the event tonight will last for approximately 1 hour. So this portion is being recorded and will be shared on our YouTube page later on. So just visit youtube.com/UConn alumni and you'll be able to pull up the recording of this at a later time, or if you want to shoot it over somebody that might have missed it down in Texas that could go and pick up the beer, whatever it might be, there's a way to do that. Second, the second portion of tonight. So during tonight's presentation, you're going to be receiving an email from us. Yes, it's magic. It's going to happen. You're going to get it. I'm going to be still here, but it's going to be from me. There's going to be instructions there on how you can access the second portion of tonight's presentation. So as you may have seen, there is a happy hour component. For this first portion, it's just going to be Sydney, myself, and Vijay. So we apologize that we can't share the screen with you right now, but for recording purposes, we're doing it this way. And then for the second half, you'll be face-to-face with all of us, being able to ask some questions of each other and of Sid and Vijay. So stay tuned for that information. And if you happen to not get that email, it's also in those confirmation emails you've already received from me to this point, as well as we will be dropping it into the chat before the event is concluded tonight as well. So you just copy and paste that, throw that in your browser, but you'll have to leave this webinar to be able to access that because it is via Zoom as well. Now, I've talked enough, so on to our featured guest tonight. First, we're going to talk about our Houston beer goddess for the evening, Sydney Porter. Sydney is a graduate of the College of Liberal Arts and Sciences from 2015, and she's the head brewer and co-owner of Southern Yankee Beer Company. She has been professionally brewing for 6 years and certainly knows her stuff. She has worked for a number of breweries, both in Texas and here in Connecticut, with one that many of us know very well, another fellow Husky, Outer Light Brewing, owned by Matt Carucci, who was also one of our founding events down in when we first launched our UConn Alumni Limited Release 1881 series. So very familiar with him. In 2018, Sydney and her family opened up Southern Yankee Beer Co. With a desire to create a third space for people to enjoy good beer, good food, and a friendly atmosphere. And Sydney, thanks so much for joining us tonight, taking some time out of your busy schedule with opening up a new spot. We're excited to talk beer with you and talk about the passion you have for UConn and how that helped you get where you are. So we appreciate that very much. On to our moderator tonight. Moderating, we have Houston Alumni Network Volunteer Leaders, Vijay Sekhara. Vijay is a 2012 graduate of the School of Engineering and currently works as a business manager at Lindy Engineering down in H-Town. And during his time at UConn, Vijay was a member of Phi Gamma Delta fraternity. He was also a member of USG and SUBOG, so he was very active, and he continues that action out there in Houston for us now, helping out. He's been an active contributor and a volunteer in Houston now for several years, helping us plan events pre-COVID, obviously, because we're not there yet as an institution. But last, I want to make sure that folks know how instrumental Vijay was in making sure that this event happened tonight. So Vijay, huge thanks to you for your efforts here and your willingness to lead this discussion tonight. And as always, my friend, it's good to see you, and it's even better to share a screen with you this time. I will turn this over to you to get our discussion started tonight.
Absolutely great. Thank you, Josh, for the introduction. Marinda for the behind-the-scenes tech support. Sydney for leading this event with me here tonight. And of course, everyone from across the country, Connecticut, Texas, California, Nebraska, wherever you may be, and whichever beer you may have in your hand, thank you for joining us tonight. To introduce myself some more, again, my name is Vijay Sekhara. I'm a 2012 graduate from the School of Engineering. I eked my way through the chemical engineering program there, and about a year later, moved from Wallingford, Connecticut, where I was born and raised, to downtown Houston, Texas, where I've been ever since. Currently in Bentonville, Arkansas on a mountain biking vacation, so calling in from the local Marriotts. But we're here not for me, but for Sydney and for beer. So Sydney, we'd all love to know a little bit more about you, where you grew up, what you did at UConn. Feel free to share.
Yeah, I'm a Navy kid. That's why I grew up in Mystic and Stonington, Connecticut until I went to college at UConn. We moved all over the place. So I've lived on north, south coasts, west, east coasts, but mostly coasts. And then I ended up going to UConn. I graduated with an ecology and evolutionary biology degree. And a week after I graduated, I started my beer career. I got a internship at Outer Light Brewing Company, owned by Tom and Matt. And I worked there for a year and a half before I moved to Houston. And while I worked there, I also went to school online at the American Brewers Guild, which set me up with my second job down here in Houston at Carbach Brewing Company. After that, I did a short stint at Platypus before the world and connived to have us open our plan a little bit earlier than I had anticipated. So we had planned to be opening in 2020. Thank goodness we didn't wait. And my brother unfortunately got laid off, but fortunately. And so he was like, I'm not gonna go get another job. Like, we're just gonna do this. Like, it's already halfway planned. Like, we're gonna just do it. And I was terrified at the moment because this was only 3.5 years of me brewing professionally. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing. I can't do this. Like, what are you throwing me into? And we just did it. And now it's been 2.5 years later and we're doing it. We're here. And this is Southern Yankee Beer Company right behind us.
I love it. That's fantastic. That's great to hear. Thank you for sharing with us. But I'd love to move on to our first beer. I know that's what a lot of our attendees are here for. Would you care to, first of all, not only introduce the first beer, but for some of us who may not know, how to pour a beer correctly and, how to properly taste a beer?
And a lot of people don't realize that tasting beer and really having the full experience of a beer is very similar to wine. Mm-hmm. Where pouring beer, it depends on how you're pouring it. From a tap is different from a can, but I'm assuming everybody's home, they're either doing it from a can or a bottle. and really tilting your glass and then pouring in softly, and then right at the end, kind of pouring a little vigorously to get that head or the foam that's on the top of the beer. That helps get some of those aromatics out of the liquid, and you can get more of the nose. And so there's different ways of actually drinking a beer. I'll go through that first, and then I'll tell you about the first beer that I have and that you guys have right now. It's really the look of it. So the look, actually, the way your eyes, it's the first part of tasting a beer, right? So if a beer is like, you say this is a lager, right? You expect it to be clear, bright, have a lot of like really like appealing, like this is a good crisp beer, right? So that's what you're mentally preparing yourself to actually drink the beer. And then you're going to smell the beer. And this one has a little bit of a citrus because I squeezed a lime in it. That's my favorite. And then it has a little bit of the creaminess from the corn and the rice and a little bit of the regular malts that we add into it. And then you're going to take a sip. And with beer, unlike wine, the finish of the beer or the actual swallowing of the beer matters. So you never spit out a beer for multiple reasons. But the first one is to really get that full tasting experience and having that full beginning, middle, and end to the beer. And then the fourth part is really tasting it in your mouth. So like you think how some beers can be thick and kind of coat your mouth, like stouts or like an oatmeal stout where it lingers a little bit longer.
Okay.
Or lighter beers where it just kind of flows and then disappears in the back of your tongue. That's called mouthfeel. And it's actually really important to the style of the beer. And then after that, if you keep your mouth closed and then breathe out through your nose, it's like a second tasting because your olfactory system is a huge part of your taste buds and how you actually experience any food or drink. And with beer specifically, because there's so much aromatics to every single beer, the actual breathing out through your nose gives you a whole nother layer of flavors.
Now, did you learn this at Southern Yankee, at Outer Light, or during your college days at UConn?
When I worked at Outer Light, my mentor there, he was very, very into beer tasting and making sure your palate is very experienced and trained, as well as my schooling. We did off-flavor tastings and how to taste beer. And never take an off-flavor course unless you absolutely want your beer experience to be ruined, because it's very educating, but once you learn how to taste good beer and bad beer, you realize there's a lot of bad beer out and about that like people don't know. And like, I'm going to let you be, ignorant about it. Go enjoy yourself.
If you spoil yourself with the good beer, you can't go back. I completely understand. Yeah.
Exactly. So it was a combination, but every brewer and even home brewers and beer aficionados, if you really want to get into beer, that's like the first step, is learning how to drink it and then how to dissect the beer itself.
Awesome. Shall we dive into our first tasting here?
So okay. I think you have cans, so you can actually show the can. That's our K Pablo Mexican lager. You can kind of see it in the video. But this one has been our best seller for almost 2 years. I did it on a whim because lagers take about 3 times as long as an ale does in the fermenter, just because of that lagering process. This beer is very similar to like a Dos Equis. You get something that's very nice and crisp, but it's not as dry as a Pilsner or like you think like a Bud Light or like, the basic like beers, the domestics, you might say. It has a little bit more roundness because of that corn in it. It actually gives it a little bit more softness and sweetness. Whereas a Pilsner has a little bit more crisp harshness because it doesn't have that corn. It has a little bit more hop flavor. This is just like one of those hot weather sitting outside.
I was going to say, this is a porch beer. Yeah.
It's a porch beer. It is. And not enough people really recognize that a lager and is probably one of the top 5 hardest beers to make. Because you can't hide anything behind it. It's a very simple flavor, But that means that if you do anything wrong in your process or your recipe development, in your post-production, in your cans, in your kegging, in any part, there's nothing that can hide any flaw. So if you don't do it right, it is very obvious in the end product. So I'm very proud of our K Pablo, our Mexican lager.
I think y'all did it right. I'm enjoying myself already.
Thank you. It's definitely one of those beers that you can enjoy both for its merit as a very good beer, and then also just like have a beer and cheers with your friends, you know?
Oh yeah, this is definitely going to be a tailgate beer in the near future. So This is great.
Absolutely. And you can find a lot of different beers that are very similar to this. Lagers are making a recurrence in a lot of breweries. And so it's not something it's hard to find, for sure.
So I'm going to jump in from a question from God over here from the, because you can't see me at the moment. What's the ABV on this one?
The ABV on this is 5.7, I believe, or 5.6%. So it's a little bit higher than most like Dos Equis or domestics or something that's like a little bit crisp. It's a very easy drinker, but it's definitely going to make you...
You got to be careful is what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
Gotcha. Awesome. No, I love it. I hope everyone else at home in Houston and abroad are enjoying theirs as well. Moving on, a lot of us on the call, living in Houston or nearby. I know we have a few other alums elsewhere and abroad, but I can relate. I moved to Houston back in 2013 because I simply couldn't find a job. I don't know how things are now, but I mean, and in your case, what prompted the move to Houston? Why, from all the way from the Northeast to the Bayou City?
So I'm a Navy kid, right? We moved all over the place. I lived in Connecticut the longest, so I still consider that my home state, my home, and in my home away from home, That's where I grew up. That's where my friends and I talk. We live all over the world now. I have one of my best friends is in Hungary.
Wow.
And literally everywhere, but like all of us are like, oh, when we all go home, it's Connecticut. But at the same time, we're kind of chameleons. So my whole family, we're able to kind of find a home with wherever we move.
Okay.
And so I was never really stuck in one place. And I hadn't yet met, hadn't yet met my now husband until after we had already made the plan to move to Texas. But my brother was based here in oil and gas for about 10 years. And he was the one that's kind of solidified. That's where we're going to do our big dream, our brewery, just because he was the one that had that, stable job where it's like, okay, you can be the kind of, if shit hits the fan, you can still fund some money.
Yep.
And I mean, obviously, life doesn't work out like that. So we moved on, but we had already been in planning phases. I had been down here for a couple of years after that. And then my parents, when my dad retired from the Navy, they moved down here, and now we're all here in Houston and Conroe, and we live literally, so my brother lives down in the Loop. He lives in the Heights, or in Greater Heights, and I live here next to the brewery, and my parents live in Conroe. So we now spread like most of the Houston area, barring the south side. We moved because of Alex, but also because there's a ton of opportunity in the beer industry in the South.
Oh, absolutely. The beer industry has exploded since at least I've been here.
Yes.
We had St. Arnold, Karbach, Eighth Wonder, and now it's just everywhere.
Yeah, so now there are 70 working breweries from Galveston to Conroe. But I think there's like 5 I know of that are in planning right now.
Oh,
and
okay.
Even with that, like a lot of people ask, are you worried about, competition? And I'm like, not really. I mean, look at how many people are in Houston.
If
people
anything,
in Connecticut, for reference, it takes an hour to get from Houston to Houston.
I needed to get off the highway, grab a beer, and then get back in traffic on the way home.
Exactly.
I understand completely. But it almost seems like the beer industry in Houston is just supportive of each other. I mean, we understand their competition, but we're happy to see a new player in town.
It's definitely more supportive, and it's definitely one of those industries that we all recognize how hard it is to get the business going. And so it's very, I don't expect it, but it's very common that when we go out to breweries, I'm like, hey, I'm from Southern Yankee, like, here's some free beer, here's some stickers. And they're like, well, here's some free beer. And we all know that you've really had to grind your teeth. You really had to put in that effort into actually making the product and making your business. And that's with a lot of self-made small businesses, but it's just especially hard with brewing because of all of the equipment and the amount of money that you have to put
a lot of initial capital.
Exactly.
In Greater Houston itself, how many breweries did you say we have now? I
know of 70 working. I believe, 70.
That's amazing.
And they're of all different sizes. I mean, nano, 1 barrel. So 1 barrel is 32 gallons. To St. Arnold's,
and that's different from an oil barrel, right? In Houston,
yes, it is
55 gallons. Completely different units of measurement, right?
We recently hired a ex St. Arnold employee who was telling us, we were talking about our barrelage and what we do in a year. Last year we did just over 260 barrels in the year, which was really good for us.
Awesome.
And then we were like thinking, I'm like, that's one batch at St. Arnold's.
Oh, wow.
That's literally like one of their batches that they're doing.
And they had a head start.
We're nano, we're micro, we're small. Okay, we're craft, we're little. I mean, we're all getting craft, but we're little.
So I mean, tell us more about the start of Southern Yankee Beer Co. And more, where did this passion for beer and brewing come from?
My dad. My dad's been home brewing since the early 90s. So before I was even born. I'm 28 and he's been brewing for almost 30 years. And so it's been home brewing has always been like that constant. We've moved all over the place, but there's always a couple kegs in the fridge. And there's my dad, on wintry, snowy Connecticut days, he would be out with his cap and a spoon stirring up the mash and stuff in our front lawn. I mean, we met our neighbors when I first moved from South Carolina to Connecticut. We moved in December. We moved into our house. And our neighbors thought we were crazy Southerners. Like, what are we doing? Because we're sitting in lawn chairs with this contraption that looks like we might be frying a turkey or something. And they came over to say hi, and they're like, what you doing? And we're like, oh, we're making beer. And like their faces are like interested, but like, okay, these are our neighbors now. They became some of our best friends though, for sure.
I completely get it, being a nutmegger way back when, then coming down to Texas. I understand completely. I'm curious though, Josh, Marinda, maybe cover your ears. Did any of those kegs make it to campus?
No, but I mean, you start brewing, I started my appreciation for good beer early.
Good, awesome.
I was known as more of the beer snob in college than anything else. Mind you, my go-to, like if I could only choose one beer ever, is still going to be Yuengling, because that's my college, like, go get a tall boy at the gas station.
I remember we had to drive to New Jersey to go get Yuengling back in the day, but I think it's in Connecticut now, maybe. I'm not sure. I will admit, back in my day, 2012 graduate, Natty Light was what was at the fraternity parties and whatnot. I've matured since then, maybe just a little bit.
I mean, it's nostalgia, and it's also just a really good beer. So like, that's not in any way a bad thing.
Yeah, we've got a couple folks in the chat right now. Natty Light was big in 2010 from Anne Marie. My sophomore year roommate Andrew, he's on here right now too. He knows we had a bit of Yuengling way back when on campus. My brother, crazy enough, my brother-in-law is on here as well. They may have gotten a shipment of Southern Yankee beer from me maybe a couple weeks ago.
That's okay.
We've been calling it. So I don't know about you. Is it time to try beer number 2?
I was like, I'm empty, so we can go on to the next one.
What have we got here?
Our metric is like, if I can drink this while also talking, that's enough time for you to taste things.
Yeah, everyone else has been waiting on us. Yeah.
Well, this is it's a Hefeweizen, right? So it's a very common flavor. It's very similar to like what you'd imagine like a very common beer, like a Blue Moon. It's a little bit more traditional. But this is called the Reinheitsgebot. So the Reinheitsgebot is the German purity law. So it's a not because we added oranges and lemons. And that's why the label has oranges and lemons kicking the 1516 law, Reinheitsgebot. That's the label on the can.
Oh, I didn't know if that was the Magna Carta or something. That happened around then too.
It's German. Sure. It's the German purity law. So a Hefeweizen is a very yeast-driven beer. So I wanted to get a good variety of the styles. You can find similar beers like Hefeweizen. A Belgian wit is very similar. It's a wheat beer. It's a very yeast-heavy beer. This one we fermented cold, and that actually lets the yeast get more of like a clove spice citrus flavor.
Oh, wow. Okay,
yeah. The banana.
That definitely comes through.
Hefeweizens you can ferment hot. So the fermenter is like at 72, 76 in that range. And that will actually get more of that heavy banana bread clove kind of flavor, like banana candy. We wanted a little bit more brighter one here. So I added that cold fermentation, and then we added lemons and oranges to make it really citrusy and refreshing and really soft, because this has a lot of wheat in it. And that wheat makes the beer itself kind of pillowy in your mouth. So when you're drinking it, it doesn't have any sharp edges. It's just very smooth and easy and goes down easy.
No, I love it. For me, you know, being, I'm still afraid to call myself a Texan after 7.5 years, but living in Texas, you know, from the Northeast, this is easy for me to reminisce about Thanksgiving in the Northeast, you know, those spices, that citrus, but, you know, easy to enjoy when it's still 90 degrees here in November.
Yes, I can see that. It's definitely, for me, a summer beer or a spring beer, just because even in, you know, in Connecticut and any other state when it's really hot, like you just need something that's just easy.
Absolutely.
And I love the softness of a good hef, and it's a beer you can find in tons of breweries. It's a very common flavor profile. I bet you go into any liquor store and they have ones that are going to be more easygoing like this one, or there are some that are very traditional German styles, and they'll have like the really fancy gold labels and like bottles from Germany. And they'll taste like a little bit more, generally a little bit more malty, just because of how they brew. That's what I've noticed. American Hefeweizens tend to be a little bit on the refreshing side versus malty side. That's just what I've noticed in hefs. Yeah, but I love a good hef. That's delicious.
So slight plug here, you know, when I'm at the store and whatnot, I'm looking at, you know, wine bottles, beer cans. Sometimes if I don't know what's going on, I pick based on the label.
Oh, yeah.
Where did these labels come from? Tell us about these.
So all of our labels are a collaboration between me and our design studio, Padron Design Studios here in Houston. Gracie and her team are phenomenal. And what I do is I basically doodle, I draw out a design, like not a design, I draw out the characters. So I draw the characters and then I send the character to Gracie and her team, and she turns it into our labels.
I love it.
It works really well, and she's able to basically take my idea and make it professionalized instead of just like coloring drawings.
Get it on the can. Yeah, right.
Can you please take it?
No, that's great. So, you know, you've moved around as a Navy kid, had your time in Connecticut, moved down to Houston, Southern Yankee Beer Company.
Yeah.
What is it like starting your own business?
Terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying, for many reasons. I mean, for us, sorry, my dog's barking in the background.
I just met the dog a couple weeks ago, and oh my God,
he's precious. He's a baby. He's 4 months old still, so he's still learning. It really, I still struggle with this now. It's been 2.5 years, and I don't think any responsible business owner will not ever struggle with that. It's fun and terrifying and horrible all at the same time. So it's this responsibility both to making sure that you are providing for yourself, your family. Mm-hmm. And that was in the very beginning. And then making a good business model, making a good business, making good products, maintaining that product. And in what we do, our tap room, we sat down and Josh kind of said this earlier, we sat down and we really wanted to make it a third space. We wanted it to make it a home away from home. We wanted it to be the Cheers of the neighborhood. And a lot of businesses say that, a lot of bars say that, but I can pretty much tell you that like it is for our neighborhood now.
I appreciate when I came to pick up my 4-pack, a couple weeks ahead of time, every person that walked in there, you knew them by their name. Yeah. And just said, hey, how's it going? You welcomed them with open arms. I loved that. That was the atmosphere was absolutely fantastic.
And that's something that we really want to cater to, especially because, there's 70 breweries. So you can have amazing beer, but you also need to have those other things. You need to have a good business model. So my brother is our business manager. He graduated from Rice. And he has a wonderful mind for managing the business aspect of things. Mm-hmm. And then our staff, we've hired on some amazing, amazing people that have really just become an extension of our whole concept, an extension of our beer family. We call it our beer family, both for our employees, our patrons, and the community around us. And that's something that is terrifying at the same time. Really, it is, because
I can't imagine. Yeah, I'm sure.
You're responsible for yourself and you're responsible for this, but now every employee you bring on, you're responsible for them. You're responsible for their family now too. And so you're constantly trying to okay, I'm pivoting. We have an issue, let's solve it. Let's move to this next part. And I think that goes really easily into the 2020 situation and how we dealt with it in the last year is pivoting. Is luckily that it caught us in a time of major growth. So we've already been in that process of okay, what's next? What problem do we need to fix now? And so we're already in that phase. And so it was less of a shock to us with all of these major changes that are happening, where we're okay, well, if we can't have our tap room open, let's get we bought a canning line, and our canning line has been amazing. It's gone crazy.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
On the amount of cans that we sell now. And luckily we've just been able to keep ourselves together. That's one benefit of having a family business, because you guys can quit every day, but you're still going to come back to work the next day. Right? So we can quit and fire each other and fight, and then you just keep on going. That's kind of what it is. And then you realize, we're now something bigger than just our family business, because we've brought on all these people that we're now responsible for. And I think that it's a great thing, but it's also terrifying.
From what I can tell, especially with, the COVID-19, the pandemic, I don't want to say 2020 because, we still have it here in 2021. Southern Yankee Beer Company, you're not just building a family with the people who work with you, mm-hmm. You're building a community with your patrons, almost like you're building a neighborhood.
Yeah, that's what we want.
We're going through so many trials and tribulations during this COVID nonsense, and this is a place where it seems like people can go to feel normal, feel like they're home. What's the pandemic done for y'all, and what, how have things been since?
like we've been pivoting, we're going, but we've also been, we made there's different ways to really approach it, right? So some businesses can just hunker down and keep on going and trying to stay alive. We decided to take on more risk. So
okay.
we took on some more loan, and we are now opening a second location.
Oh, wow.
In downtown Houston. So that and honestly, the pandemic in last year really pushed us to do that, because it allows us to reach more people, which would then provide for our staff more, be able to get more product out. And in that whole process, we've tripled our employee number, and we're now hiring more. So I'm about to be putting out an ad for an assistant brewer, because our production is going to triple this year. So
for any of our attendees who are looking to get into the brewing business, contact Sydney after this.
Yeah, you send me an email. It's definitely been crazy and unexpected, and everybody is kind of reeling and trying to figure out what is next. But we've definitely been working really hard to keep ourselves together and really care for the people, both our staff and our patrons, the people that we really care about too, the people that come in. And, you know, if we don't see them for a few days, and they usually come a few days, I'm like, hey, like, where are you? Are you okay?
I love that.
Like,
wow.
Are you on vacation? Like, what's up? Because I haven't seen you in a week, and I'm concerned. You know, that's definitely been part of this whole last year. Yeah.
I don't know about you. Yeah, I'm almost done. So maybe we move on to your number 3 here.
Yes. So this is our Work Like a Captain. It's a West Coast IPA. So it's a little bit more of an easygoing West Coast IPA. West Coast IPA is a little different than like a New England IPA or an East Coast IPA, simply because of the hop usage. So when you're adding hops, the timing you're using them in the beer process can give different flavors. So these hops are generally added a little bit early in the boil, and then there's some sprinkled within the boil that gives it a little bit more bitter bite, as well as more of an earthy, piney kind of characteristic from hops like Simcoe, Cascade, Centennial, some of those, you know, classic American hops that you can find in a lot of places. This is our bread and butter IPA. That's what I like to call it. Simply
I will say, I cracked the can open and started pouring it, and I wish I had a candle of this. I mean, that just like hit me in the face. Yeah. Love it. Wow. It's
nice and piney, and then it has a little bit more caramel characteristic in the malt itself that balances out that pine, where, you know, New England IPAs and East Coast IPAs tend to go the more tropical route. They go like super fruity citrus, and you have IPAs that are a little bit more softer. They have pillowy kind of color. They look hazy, and they're lighter in color because they're less on malt flavor and all on hop flavor. This is kind of that like just go-to IPA I'd like to enjoy, and that's about it. Like there's nothing, it's not a complicated IPA. It is what it is, and it's pretty good. That's what I like to call it.
It took me a few years. It was probably my mid-20s. You know, prior, like I was never an IPA person, and then all of a sudden something clicked where it's just, I adore them now, and this is fantastic. So
yeah, I it's definitely an acquired taste, and hops are something that you kind of have to learn to enjoy, or if you'd like to try to enjoy. One thing that we do here that I am very adamant about, and a lot of people that are into beer will know about IBUs, that are international bitterness units. And I hate that number. We don't have it on any of our menus. Honestly, I don't know any of the IBUs after I make the recipe. I don't talk about it because IBUs it's bad math, because it's an estimation of a whole crop of hops. Like it's not even close. You
get kicked out of the engineering school at UConn for making an estimation of an estimation. So,
basically,
yeah, you can't do that.
It's that plus like it doesn't take into account the malt, the alcohol, because alcohol tastes sweet on your tongue. And so all these different factors come into making a beer. And so you can have a sweet stout and an IPA be at the same levels of IBUs, but they taste completely different because of all these other factors. So I don't put IBUs on anything because it scares people away from trying something that they actually might like because of the word bitterness units. And so,
and to be honest, it used to do the same thing for me. I get it completely. It's just, pour me the damn thing and let's see if I like it or
exactly.
No. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. So I've done a beer school here a couple of years ago. We have some of our regulars actually inside the tap room right now that did that class, and I really went into that, and they're like, wow, I never really thought about that. And they left, came back the next week, and they tried so many different things because they realized that it was holding them back from trying something that they would enjoy.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So you mentioned the new location downtown. Whereabouts are we looking at for our locals?
So it's on West Alabama, right across from, what's that college? I need to remember what it is. It's the old Good Dog building. They unfortunately had to move their Heights location permanently. And so we were able to take over that spot in Montrose. And we have to do some construction, and there's a huge parking lot across the street. So parking's not an issue.
That place is happening. Oh, goodness. I'm so happy for y'all.
It's really wonderful. We were able to kind of jump on that spot, and it's going to be great. Like we're doing some really cool stuff with the inside to open it up a little bit. There's a huge back patio where we're going to have a screen to do movie shows and music and all sorts of stuff. And we really want it to be an extension of this tap room here. So we've actually hired our chef for down there. He's actually here cooking our food tonight. We've hired our bar manager. He's starting in a couple weeks, and he'll be working here in the tap room to get to know our clientele, how our beers are poured. And we hired our GM a couple months ago. He's been helping us really build out everything. And we really want to make sure those core people absorb that third space mentality, absorb that like, hey, how are you doing? Like, I know you, how was your last week? Like, I want that to be an extension both in Montrose and here for sure.
And, that's a great philosophy because, during the pandemic and whatnot, our restaurant and, bar and brewery industry have definitely taken a hit, but it's made us really appreciate, why we go to these places. I mean, I can buy, a can of beer or, a 6-pack, whatever it may be from whatever liquor store. I go to Southern Yankee Beer Company for the atmosphere because they know my name. Because, I'm not sure what beer exactly I'm feeling right now, but if I can give you my mood, you'll tell me, I'm going to want the K Pablo. I'm going to want, like the work like a captain. And, it's that familiarity. It's the idea of a neighborhood. It's fantastic. I love that. With the new location coming on, where do y'all see Southern Yankee Beer Company in the next, 1, 3, 5 years?
Holy mackerels. Okay, I'm going to go to that question after we start this big beer.
All right.
A little bit of a breather. That's a big question. And we do have plans, and I'll kind of give you a sneak peek. So our last beer here it's very dark. It's for those dark and malty people. This is called Rasputin's Daughter. So we did a few variants on it. It's a Russian Imperial Stout, which is a beer that's close to my heart. I love malt. I love dark beers, and I love complexity. I love malt beers that can be dark but not be one note, and I'm super proud of this one because it has that beginning and middle and end to this beer. It has a lot of coffee notes, dark chocolate, and none of this was added in. Like, I didn't add any coffee. We didn't add any dark chocolate. All of that is from malt and from those caramel malts and the actual malting process. So it is a very complex beer. This beer, actually, it's been good if you've been warming it up and you can get a lot of Russian Imperials, stouts, porters. Dark beers generally like warmer temperatures. So if you actually warm up a dark beer, you get a lot more flavors from it. And so this one, it's a little heavier, so it's 11%. So it's definitely a sipper. Yeah, getting you started. But this
my favorite sound, yeah.
Oh, I know, just a nice snap. But it has that really nice creamy head on top. It's a bit of a heavier beer, right? So it's not a beginner beer unless someone comes to me and they're like, oh, I love, black coffee. I'm like, all right, here you go. You want that? Yeah. This is what you want, because it's definitely got that same intensity of flavor as like a really nice, well brewed cup of coffee. We'll see what you think.
See, that's my difficulty with stouts, because it does remind me of a cup of coffee, but it would look really bad in the office if I started drinking this at 8 a.m.
I mean, Eureka Heights does have a coffee mug that says definitely not beer. So like that could definitely hide that. And
but this wakes me up. This gives me the coffee flavor. I love it. So yeah. I'm a black coffee guy. Wow, no, this is fantastic.
And this was inspired after Old Rasputin from Founders. So like something that's very classic Russian Imperial. It's not for a beginner beer. It's not for a beginner palate, but it is just delicious. And as you drink it, you can pick out a lot more flavors. It's a more complex beer for sure. And then going into what you asked earlier, we have a lot of plans. So I try and kind of be the one that's like reining in my brain, just because there's too many things for me to think about. My dad is the dreamer. So he's the one that is planning on, him and Alex, my brother, who's our business manager, are the one that really pushed for the second location. And now that's happening. We were going back and forth on third locations and production breweries to what we need in the next year. And because we're most likely going to be tripling production, we're looking to expand this space and taking over the next bay in this building.
Holy cow, wow.
And then that would add, instead of a food truck, we may be putting in a full kitchen. And then we may be doing expansion here with more tanks. You see right here, this tank was delivered yesterday. It's not up in production yet, but it's there. We're getting started. This year is going to be kind of a test to see where we're going to go. But we dream of, buying, 40 acres out in kind of the outskirts of Houston, where we have a destination, and it's a big production brewery feeding craft houses. So we have multiple craft houses at that.
Wow, I love that.
And we'll have a working farm to table for all of our restaurants. So we'll have a farmer farming all of our stuff, and we'll have hops growing, even though they don't grow very well in Texas, but it would be cool to grow our own. And I don't know, but we've dreamed lots of things, but we're very much trying to both have a dream, but also what can we actually do? and while also being responsible, right? We're trying to both dream, take care of our current team and our current staff, while also expanding into what people want. So we wanted to make sure we expanded, whereas, more people are demanding our beer. So what do we do now? We get a new tank and we match that demand. And once that demand increases, we'll just keep growing like that, which is a little bit of a slower growth pattern. There are some places that are like, you know what, I'm just going to go gung-ho and throw my beer at people until it sticks. And so that works too, but we don't have that much money. So we're kind of going the slow and steady route, and just kind of growing and making sure each step is being done as best as we possibly can before we move to the next step. I hope that answered your question.
So Josh, Miranda, it sounds like we might need to have a part 2 of this, once we're able to, if those expansion projects come through, and, maybe we have that farm table dinner with the beer pairings and whatnot. You know, maybe we do something around the winter time so we can get you guys out of the Northeast and come on down to Texas where it's, I don't know, 50 degrees in the summer.
I think that's a great idea, but I wanted to point out to Sydney that I'm already ahead of you.
Hey, there you go.
It's like, you know, this just happened to be sitting around here when you mentioned that probably not alcohol. I mean, if this is what I have to drink my stouts in, I'm completely behind this.
There you go. Yeah.
I've had colleagues that actually bought this for me because of all these events. They thought it was perfect. So I think it makes some sense.
And then I know Josh asked earlier that you guys might like to look at the brewing space, and it's really not that big. So I'm literally just going to lift my computer because that is the whole brewery.
The chemical engineer in me is so very excited right now. So thank you.
That's all the brewery. And like we have stacks of kegs. We managed to pump out quite a good bit of beer with a small system. And that's really just because we have a lot of these tanks, which are fermenters. Mm-hmm. And that's where the yeast is eating the sugar from the wort or the sugar water we brew. And that is what the alcohol is from. And that's where a lot of the flavors are from. So we have 11 of them now. No. 10, 11. Yeah, 11 of them. Oh my gosh. Sorry. I just brain farted. We have 11 of them now, and we are probably going to be ordering 2 or 3 more this year before we expand and get a larger brew house so that we don't have to do as many batches per tank. But yeah. Any questions? I know we wanted to have a few minutes at the end for
I think that's perfect segue. By the way, if anybody's interested, it does say probably beer. They make some that say probably wine. Some of them say no way there's alcohol in it. It's great.
I assume the Yukon logo is not on that mug.
On this one, no, but it is double-sided, so it doesn't matter if you're left-handed or right? I mean,
there you go. Multi-purpose.
So, no, thank you both so much. Vijay, thanks for taking the lead on this. There were a few different questions that did come in here. Well, the first question actually came in asking, Sydney, if you've actually had any chocolate or chocolate cherry stouts that you can talk about that you might have on hand or in the process of making.
Yes, actually. So this beer that we talked about last, Rasputin's Daughter, we did a chocolate cherry version. I think we have 3-4 packs left of this year's. We'll be doing it again in the future. And we do a dark chocolate stout, I think every fall. I think I'm going to be sticking it in. We have a peanut butter chocolate stout coming out in about 2 months. We do a lot of different interesting stouts and fruited stouts, fruited beers. And I think one of our most sought after beers that is no longer a beer was our Cancun Kami, which is a tequila barrel aged Russian Imperial stout with coconut, vanilla, and cinnamon in it. So we do a barrel aging program, and we have different barrels coming in and out. Most recently, we'll be bottling a Heaven Hill bourbon barrel aged milk stout that will be coming out this summer.
I'm excited. I love that. Heaven Hill's great.
Vijay, be careful. You might have a lot of people asking you to mail you stuff soon. So just keep that on the radar. I'm doing so every brewery generally has a Grand Cru or their beer that is like, look what I can do. So like I'm doing a barley wine that we've been aging in rum barrels and will be aging for another about 6 months. It's just kind of barley wines. The longer they kind of sit and age, just become these beautiful, beautiful complex beers. So we are going to do lots of dark stuff as well as the hazy IPAs. We have a Pilsner, our Czech Pilsner that is like, we call it our crispy boy. Like it's my favorite. I love it. Yeah, so we do all sorts of stuff.
Fantastic.
You've actually already answered one of the questions that did come in about the barrel program, so thank you for doing that. The second one is, you just kind of alluded to it just now. In terms of your favorite styles to brew, what would you name your top 3?
Okay, So I get this question a lot, and there's different answers. So the actual brewing process, I love our Fuzzy Bastard, which is our cream ale, because it consists of like 3 bags of grain, and it's a short brew day, and it's very easy to do. So in the summers when it's hot and like 90 degrees, but like feels like 110, plus I'm standing over boiling liquid, quick and easy is my favorite. But when it comes to actually like complexity and kind of really doing some creative stuff.
Utilitarian brew.
What was that?
The Marriott internet had a little issue there. So repeat your question there, buddy. Oh, we might be losing him. Go ahead, Sid.
Well, I'll keep on going venting.
We had saying the utilitarian brew.
Slow-mo internet in Arkansas today, apparently.
It's all right.
All right, we'll get back to this.
Stuff, yeah. I love malts, and so we just released our Flex Squad Belgian quad, which was a much more complex. It has a lot of layers of malts. There's a malt in there called Special B it tastes kind of like raisins and dried plums. You've got a lot of like deep caramel, burnt caramel toffee, a lot of those kind of flavors that you can add in with like those darker malts without any of the bitterness. So it has a lot of those like really just intense malt flavors. And then I love playing with saisons. Saisons can be sour, tart, funky. They can be fruited. They can be spiced. They can be barrel aged. They can have a thicker mouthfeel like Belgian saisons that are a little bit more robust. And they can be citrusy and herbal and refreshing like French saisons that are super dry, very similar to like a champagne. So like that's a huge, broad variety of getting your creativity out. With saisons, you can do so many things.
That's awesome. No, thank you. And BJ, it looks like your internet has corrected itself, so we should be good there. One of the other questions that did come in, now we know about your beer, Sid, but what we also have heard a lot about, and you touched on this briefly, is your pizza. We know you're known for your pizza. So yes, we've got to ask the question, and this comes in from Boston, Massachusetts. Yes, Andrew's asking more questions.
Was this Andrew Taylor?
I know it's surprising. He's getting called out here. Many of us know him. He's one of our volunteer leaders up in Boston. He was in New York for a long time. And he's asking the questions if you pay homage to the GOAT. And I thought immediately, if you pay homage to Tom Brady, I mean, why would we do that?
No, he's asking about pizza. Come on.
Now, I don't know if you heard, but
Pepe's or Sally's, but I like Pepe's.
But here's the thing. Unfortunately, today, the founder of Pepe's passed away today. So that's the bad news here in Connecticut today. So, hopefully flags will get lowered to half staff, all of the stuff that we need to do to honor what Pepe's has brought to the table. But talk to us about your pizza situation here.
So our food concept is very similar to our beer, where we want really good basics, like just really well done, right? So our beer quality is number one. Our food is the same. So we have a wood-fired oven, and that's all we cook with. So we have wings, we have roasted Brussels sprouts, and we have thin crust Neapolitan style pizza. So it's none of that thick crust, which I love. I'm going to be honest, like Domino's. But I also have an appreciation for that really, really good, well done pizza. And so we make everything from scratch. Our sauce is made from scratch with like Italian tomatoes. Like we get the right kind of cheese. We make our dough in-house, and it's a wild yeast dough. So it's actually a sourdough like kind of taste. And it's a starter that we've had for the last 2.5 years. So we've been
Sydney, you got to be careful. You might open up a pizzeria soon. If
we are a pizzeria, though. No. Like, we've actually had people like suggesting, like, people like, what's the best pizza on the north side? Like, Southern Yankee Beer Company. Like, we've had people that don't drink beer are now regulars just for our pizza and our wings, because our wings.
No, I've had it, and I didn't just have the pizza slice. I had some of your beer, and then I had the whole pizza. So, yeah, I understand completely.
Well, what goes better with beer? Pizza.
And that's what we were thinking. So we were tired of wrangling food trucks at our spot because it was so hard to get people to stay even when we're slow or busy or whatever. So we were like, okay, we're going to have to get food. And so for the first year of us having the food truck, my brother and I were making the pizza too. So I was making the beer during the day and then making the pizza at nighttime. And we were doing that and making sure the quality is wonderful. But we are known now for our thin crust, handmade, hand-tossed pizzas, as well as our cast iron wood-fired wings, which are very different than any wing you've ever had. And I think they're probably some of the best wings in the city. I'm just saying, like, I love our wings, and we're going to move this whole concept to our second location as well. So we'll have a bigger pizza oven there so we can get more throughput while also keeping up that same delicious taste.
That's awesome.
I love it. So for before we wrap up, just to our, Houston alums, make your way to Southern Yankee Beer Company. I mean, obviously you've got the 4-pack in front of you right now, but if you're looking for that neighborhood feel, this is the place where you want to be. For our alums who are outside of Houston, this is what we do with our alumni network. We connect people together. We support local businesses, not only in our towns and cities, but, run by those alums of, our university. And for those folks who, those handful of folks who may not be Houstonians or may not be UConn alums that are joining us as well, we expect to see you at the next one.
Yeah, if you're ever down in the Bayou City, come swing by, man.
Yeah, so Andrew Taylor, our Boston affiliate, keeps messaging me here. He visits me. I've been here 7 years. He's visited me 8 times. So he just messaged me, please take me to Southern Yankee Beer Company the next time I come visit. Andrew, we have to deal with your wedding first in June, and then you can come back and visit in the fall. Josh, I'll send it back to you.
Appreciate it. And Vijay, absolute kudos, my friend. I know you mentioned that you had not moderated many of these before. You never could have told me that, because based on tonight, man, you hit a home run. And I think our participants tonight would echo that sentiment. And Sydney, you told us that you know how to talk and you could just do this and do this. There's no doubting that at all. And this is your jam, right? This is what you do when it comes to beer. You know your stuff. And it was a pleasure to hear both of you kind of talking back and forth. Folks, before you find your way either heading out tonight or joining us for the happy hour piece, a couple of quick things. One, if you are planning on joining us in the happy hour portion, you can take a look in the chat function. We did drop the URL in there. It should have also hit you in your email tonight as well from me during this presentation. And again, it was there as you signed up and got your confirmations and everything else that you needed to do. That being said, huge thanks to Sydney. Huge thanks to Vijay for joining us tonight, talking a little bit about beer, about your business, Sydney. We wish you all the luck. And in all honesty, next time we're in Houston and next time any of our Huskies are going through Houston, there is one stop they need to make, and clearly that's Southern Beer Co. So to all of our friends out there, definitely make it a part of your next trip. And with that being said, we will now transition ourselves over to the happy hour. So if you head that way, now we'll be jumping in there shortly. So we'll let you in just a second. You'll get into the waiting room and we'll go from there. But until then, we'll see you next time. Thanks everybody for joining.
See you all soon.